So it doesn't seem like 5 minutes ago when our garden used to look like this, and it was just this kind of great big overgrown mess, and we had to strip it all back and get all of the invasive species out and all of the dead wood and dead trees and brambles and everything like that. We kind of had to turn it into a bit of a blank canvas, but it's getting there. And now in 2024, I think it's time to give you a summer garden tour. I think it's about time as well that I gave you a bit of an update on the tomatoes, because if you remember right back to March time when I literally planted the seeds for these tomatoes, they're huge now. I'll show you them in a minute, but let's start up at the top end of the garden. We'll work our way this way. I'll explain a few of the things that have worked really well, some things that have worked less well. What are we going to grow again next year? What are we not going to bother with? And man, the sunflowers. Let me show you. So at the start of 2024 it was looking like this, but we're now into the middle of August and things are looking pretty good. I'm quite happy with the way things have turned out. There's a couple of things I'm less happy about that I will show you in a moment. We'll start off with some of the pots on the decking just very quickly. We've got the crocosmia is just starting to come through here, looking gorgeous. We've got a begonia in the pot with that as well. I'll talk about the marigolds shortly because the marigolds have been spectacular. Really, really happy with those. These ones I think are starting to get a little bit close to the end of their life because they bloomed really, really well earlier on in the year. And now they're starting to get a bit gangly, but we've got a lot of new growth coming through at the bottom here, so I'm tempted to cut this back quite hard and see how much new stuff comes through from the bottom. We shall see. Parsley hasn't done particularly well. We've got some thyme there, chives, oregano, petunias with the agapanthus are looking great. Same over this side for whatever reason, probably because it gets a little bit more sun over here. This one's gone a little bit crazy and the petunias have taken over slightly, but the agapanthus is still there in the middle, doing fine. The purple clematis coming up the fence here really came into its own for the first time this year, and we'll train that along the fence over time. This is of course the sunnier side of the garden, and I've put quite a lot of stuff into pots because it just lets me kind of move stuff around, keeps the slugs away a little bit as well. Is that a cheeky slug or not? What are slugs like? I also no longer need this stake in here because that was for a zinnia, which I'll talk about the zinnias shortly as well. Strawberries have all been eaten by birds. This is just some begonias at the front to give it a bit of colour. And yes, by the way, Crocs with socks for the win, unless you want really sweaty, clammy feet. Most of the stuff here we've already covered off in other videos, so I'm not going to go into it too much. This is one of the basils from the greenhouse. It's bolted and I figured, well, we'll shove it outside in a pot and we'll see what it does. It's not in the best of health. We've then got a couple of lavatera around this side as well, which we grew from seed. The random purple flowers that we didn't know what they were going to be, or the sea of blue or whatever it was, they turned out to be mostly cornflower, so those who mentioned that in the comments, well done, you've got that correct. I don't know if I would bother growing them again. I think if I did, I think I would just scatter them in a bed somewhere. I think having these in pots, they've just been a bit of a kind of gangly mess. The fuchsias have really struggled this year for whatever reason. Again, this is slug corn around here, but this should be huge, and it's just stayed like at this kind of, what, 3-4 inch height, because I was hoping this fuchsia would turn into a great big bush, but it hasn't really done anything. We have got a sage at the back there, and that will bush out eventually, but we could desperately do with something else kind of here. Let's quickly talk about the sunflowers, because very odd things are going on here. I planted red sunflower seeds, and A, I've never seen red sunflowers get this tall in my entire life, and B, this one's yellow and not red, or most of it is anyway. one of the flower heads has already started dying off, but this sunflower here, which the studio room's 2.5 meters tall, so we're probably getting on to 3 meters now. And the unusual thing is that we have got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We've got 6 sunflower heads on that. Only 2 of them have actually started blooming, but the rest will come out eventually. This one has got at least 1, 2, 3, maybe another 4th one at the back. Oh, 5. And this is definitely a red sunflower. And then this one at the moment's only got, oh no, this one's got millions on as well. And that one's got loads as well. But again, I'm confused as to why some of the red sunflowers are yellow. B, are red sunflowers supposed to get this tall? And C, are they supposed to have so many flower heads? Either way, they all seem to be very, very happy, and the bees love them, so I'll definitely be growing these again. And then crossing over to the slightly more problematic shady side of the garden, everything on this side, like we've got the lilac here, we've got the rose spirea, we've got the dog rose, and it all generally flowers in spring or early summer. And that means that for kind of peak summer, we're just lacking colour down this side of the garden. So, you know, answers on a postcard. We've got a gap here that I've planted a few Lavatera into, so maybe if they mature next year, they might start to give a bit more colour. We've got a fuchsia down the bottom here as well, which is doing better than the fuchsias on that side. At the moment, I've just got these pansies in a pot at the front there next to this yellow rose. And obviously we've got clematis up the back, another Lavatera here as well. But again, something more colourful in this little corner would probably be quite nice. We could do with cutting the lilac back again. Another thing that I've done as well is planted out sweet peas into kind of these pot things, and these have been good just to again dot some colour over on this side of the garden. The sweet peas have done really well, as you can tell. I've got another one in front of the studio room, but I think a better solution would be a more permanent plant here. We can maybe take a little bit of the grass away again, just to provide some colour. Then continuing down the shady side, again, generally a lack of colour. We've got a buddleia, which is white. We've got this apple blossom, which I can't remember if it's flowered or not. It's got a couple of little flowers left on it, but yeah, not very much. There's a peony, which has already done its thing. We do have a clematis at the back there, which is a nice kind of splash of colour against the fence. But again, we've got a little gap here that we could put something a bit more colourful. And then continuing down, obviously, apple tree. We do have this gorgeous red rose, which is looking absolutely stunning. And then we've got the sarcococa on either side of me here. But again, I think they flower white, but that's later in the year or kind of early next year. But I don't know. Answers on a postcard. Put them down in the comments what you think we should add around here. I'm tempted not to add many more structural plants, but as I say, we do have a little bit of room, maybe more for kind of bedding plants. Again, we've got alliums, but they've all done their thing and died back now. There is one allium at the back there that is still flowering. So yeah, definitely some scope of stuff to do around here. In front of the studio room, our rosemaries on this side are pretty big now, and we've got the zinnia as well, and the sweet pea that I've already talked about, plus a couple of lavender. But again, the lavender have done the thing. Generally on this side it's fine. I don't know if I would bother doing the zinnia again here, but I would like something else tall and colourful maybe in this gap. But we do have the lavender at the bottom, so we don't want to kind of drown things out too much. Then we're in the grassy knoll area in front of the studio room. Generally things are okay on this side. Again, there's some gaps and things where we could add extra bedding plants. We have got the zinnias over there, I'll talk about in a moment. And I'm vaguely thinking of adding more raised beds kind of around here anyway, because that's one thing I did kind of run out of room with. And we'll get onto the raised beds now, actually. So what we started off with on this side was onions, and then we had some lettuce, and obviously we've got cabbage here as well. And we also had shallots down this side as well. The shallots I wasn't particularly impressed with. They produced like a crop like, they were just tiny. They were used up in about one meal, so I don't know if I'd bother with shallots again. They were a little bit more hassle than they were worth. The lettuce did its thing absolutely brilliantly, but it kind of got to the point that it bolted and we had to take them out, and that gave a bit more room for these cabbages, which I don't even like cabbage, but we've got these two cabbages here. They are kind of balling up, but they've been so ravaged by slugs, I dread to think what's actually inside them. And the onions have actually done okay. I was a little bit concerned about these because for months and months they didn't seem to be doing anything at all, but they're getting to a reasonable size now, or some of them are. So as you can see, a lot of them have kind of flopped over. And to be honest, a lot of them had flopped over really, really early on in the season. I mean, for example, this one here, it's barely attached to the ground, but is it going to get much bigger? Would I do them again? I would probably do them from seed rather than doing onion sets, because I'm struggling to get my head around the economics of doing them as sets. And then at the front where we had the shallots, we've now got this curly kale. I'm hoping it's going to be all right in this heat because it is quite warm at the moment, middle of August. I know it's more of a winter crop, but it seems to be doing okay. Let us know in the comments if you think this is going to survive. And then we've got a couple of pansies at the front here just to kind of smarten things up a bit. And then into the other raised bed, the Maris Piper potatoes are still in the ground, doing fine. We've eaten some of them. We ate all of the first earlies, the foremost. They were absolutely fantastic. And we're just basically digging up the Maris Pipers as and when we need them. There was quite a lot of slug damage, but we've got a fair crop from them. And now that the foremost have gone, now that the first earlies have gone from here, I've just put some broccoli plants in that I grew from seed. Again, I've no idea if it's acceptable to plant broccoli in the middle of summer, but we'll see what they do. And then very quickly down the bottom section, I think this is what we call our zone 5, which is kind of our wild section of the garden, where we're just kind of letting things grow naturally. We did chuck some wildflower seed down at the back here as well. The poppies have already done their thing. We've got some other stuff growing through here. I'm not entirely sure what that is, but yeah, it's fine. It is what it is. It's not as colourful as I hoped, but it is the shady side of the garden, and I think ultimately we need to get something better and bigger planted up at the back there. And do you remember that sycamore I chopped down to ground level at the beginning of the year? It's already chest height. So, generally, the marigolds have been exceptional. I can't believe how big these have got, considering, well, obviously these were all grown from seed. I have never seen marigolds this big. They're absolutely huge. And they just don't stop flowering. I am obviously deadheading them every now, but generally, wow, definitely grow these again. These were classed as, I think, small marigolds or something like that. There's nothing small about them. They're absolutely massive, massive. So it's kind of ended up being a summer of yellows in the garden. But one thing that didn't work is the zinnias. Well, I'm saying that some of them did, but most of them didn't. Like, look at that. It's just a rotten kind of mess. I'll show you the zinnias that did work in a minute, because it's not all a lost cause. It's been a bit of a learning curve. So if you are ever wanting to grow zinnias in the UK, I've got a couple of tips for you. These petunias are climbing out the pot a little bit, but generally the petunias have done absolutely great. Petunias always do well here, and they're a really nice kind of accompanying plant, I think, to go with the marigolds, because the marigolds are quite tall. The petunias tend to be more kind of at ground level, soil level. The begonias haven't done very much. Normally the begonias get massive. I mean, slugs have been a relentless problem. Had the biggest haul of slugs that I've ever seen the other day. when I was tidying up next to the shed. I think I captured, I'm going to say, best part of 60 slugs in one go. They all went for a little swim. These have been pretty good. Try to remember the name. I think they're Swiss purple giants or Swiss giants or something like that. Anyway, they're basically a glorified pansy, I think. And they've done really well. This is starting to get a bit gangly, so I'm just going to cut off all of this kind of growth that's sticking out the side, and some of this as well. I might get a bit of a new lease of life. I don't know, they've all flowered. It might go a little bit further yet. But yeah, generally this is done pretty well. This is a particularly good one where we've got 3 plants in here and they're all quite healthy. I also planted a few into the beds just to fill up some little gaps really, and they've done all right as well. Not as well as the ones in the pots because, I mean, the soil around here is terrible and they will have been ravaged by slugs. But, you know, they've generally done all right. Let's talk about zinnias. So, my top tip with these, 2 top tips by the way. They need somewhere nice and sunny, and also find the worst quality soil you've got in your garden. Nice free draining, don't add any compost or anything like that. Just the worst gravelly rubbish soil in the world, and they seem to be absolutely thriving. All the ones that I've planted into pots, which obviously had compost in the pots, have died. None of them survived in pots, but all of these ones that are in this really gravelly, dry, kind of awful soil around here, devoid of all nutrients, they're doing absolutely great. Oh well, they're doing okay. And also another little subsidiary tip is that they do need some support. They do tend to just get really, really tall and then fall over. So whether or not you want to kind of have some mesh or something that they grow through, I would say probably at about 40 centimetres high, I think you need a support of some description, because once they get past that height, they do tend to just fall over. But other than that, don't kill them with kindness. So anyway, first year of greenhouse ownership, I really didn't know what to expect. And if anything, I probably planted too much stuff because I was just paranoid that everything was basically going to die. But wow, tomatoes, they're crazy. I've never seen so many tomatoes in my life. Now, they are mostly still green. Some of them are just starting to ripen up. We did try our first cherry tomato the other day. It was gorgeous. And we've just tried our first San Marzano as well. That was really nice. But generally speaking, these are doing absolutely great. I'm watering them about once a week now, but obviously with it having a bed in the ground, it doesn't need as much water as if they were in pots or in a grow bag or whatever. So they're doing all right. If anything, I'm probably overwatering them a little bit, but hey, it's been quite hot the last couple of days and it's just difficult to get the balance. I'm so paranoid about like doing things wrongly because we've got to this point. I mean, literally grew these things from seed back in March, and I am so paranoid about anything going wrong with them. But anyway, in terms of what has worked and what hasn't worked in terms of varieties and things, we have got on the end here, we've got the money maker. Now, they're not ripe yet, but my word, what a lot of tomatoes. A crazy amount of tomatoes. I've already topped off a couple of the plants. This one I'll let get a little bit bigger because we've got plenty head height there, so that can keep working its way up the string. The strings have worked really, really well, by the way, but top tip, don't bury the string in the soil. I saw that on some other YouTube channel who recommended to bury the string in the soil. Don't do that. It all just rotted away and it lost grip and it was useless. I find the best way to do string, let me show you. Oh, I'm running low on string, unfortunately. Is there any here that need tied up? I suppose I could tie that branch up. I'll show you how I go about doing it. A lot of this has been trial and error for me, so just don't take my word for it. You can work out your own way of doing things, but just bear in mind there are so-called experts all over YouTube who tell you to do things in a certain way, and then you sometimes find it just doesn't work for whatever reason. So all I do, I make a loop in the end of the string, and then I'm just going to work on this one here. So I'm going to take the string round and pass it through my loop. So obviously you would be doing this a little bit closer to the ground, but this one is a sucker. I've allowed some suckers, by the way. I haven't trimmed them all off because, well, they seem to give me loads of extra free plants. So I haven't got rid of all of them. Anyway, so then I'll just make sure it's not too crazily tight, and then I'll just wind that up the stem. And then for this one, I'm actually going to add another fixed point on the ceiling because this is slightly in between two rows. Let's add another one in. Just be really careful if you're doing this, obviously, after the plants have started growing, that you don't damage anything. And as I say, just don't make it over tight. It's just to give it a bit of extra support, because once the fruit starts growing, it does get quite heavy. Far too long. And that is that. And then as that grows, I'll just keep feeding it around that string, and that should provide more than enough support for it. As I say, just be careful with new leaves. And then once it gets to the top, I just snip off the main kind of central branch, if you like, the main kind of leader. Snip that off normally by the time it gets to about 6 inches from the top, because it'll keep growing even after you've snipped the leader off, but at least it'll not get any new growth from that point. And that's basically all I do. San Marzano is obviously a bush variety, and well, I did think these weren't doing very well, but actually this one at the front's got an abundance of fruit on it, and as I say, the tomato I've tried off it was really nice. Doesn't seem to be a huge amount of fruit on that back one, but give it time, and there's one hidden away there. And then we've got the cherry tomatoes. Wow, they are just doing absolutely crazy things. These have all pretty much reached roof level now, and I've trimmed the top off most of them, but what I'm going to do for a couple of them, just for shits and giggles basically, is just to allow a couple of them to grow on, because as far as I'm aware, these are kind of vining tomatoes. They'll keep growing until autumn as far as I'm aware. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to allow 2 leaders to keep going, and I'm just going to feed them over the top of the San Marzanos, which aren't getting particularly tall anyway, so they can just kind of follow my main steel cable that's running across the top there. Probably this one and that one there. We'll just feed them off in that direction until they run out of room. But man, huge amount of fruit on here. Some of them are just starting to ripen up, and some of the leaves are just starting to die off as well. But my understanding is that's not too much of a problem. As long as the fruit's there, it's normal for the lower leaves to start dying, I think. We shall see. And then finally we've got the Ace 55, which one of them, which ironically is the least healthy looking plant, has got the most fruit on it. This one, which is the healthiest looking one, hasn't got any fruit on it yet, for whatever reason. Maybe that's something to look forward to later in the year, or maybe I've done something wrong with that one. These do just live outside now, by the way, in the pots, and they seem to be doing kind of okay-ish. I probably should add some extra stakes in, because this one's getting quite big. So Ace 55 VF, I don't know. Jury's out, we'll see what happens with those. I did want to cover off a couple of comments that come up on a continuous basis, because the original renovation video went semi-viral, and when that happens you do get people coming to the channel who maybe will watch 2 seconds of a video and then get the keyboard warriors out, and they don't bother looking into the background of what the garden used to be like and all that sort of thing. And I still to this day get comments saying, Why did we rip so many mature trees out? And why did we have to strip the garden so bare before kind of starting again? And we should have just let nature do its thing. And it's like, no, you can't make an omelette without breaking eggs. And sometimes the best thing to do is to just start again. We didn't take out loads of trees, or certainly not living trees anyway. We took out a lot of dead trees. We took out a lot of invasive species. It was absolutely overrun with brambles and snowberries, and there were rats everywhere, massive infestation of bindweed as well. So no, if you want a vaguely usable garden, you can't just leave nature to it, unfortunately. I mean, you can, but it'll be a rat-infested mess. So it is really early days for this garden, but all I would say is if you have left a comment like that, please do go and watch some of the other videos where I've explained what we've taken out, why we had to take it out, how many new trees we've planted. We've planted a lot more trees than we've taken out as well, and most of what we're planting is native as well, as opposed to kind of invasive species. So we are trying to manage it best we can, but it is still really early days for this garden. Still loads of things that we need to do, loads of structural elements. We still need a path of some description. We don't really want it to look like a great big long strip of grass. The grass is there just so we're not standing on mud, basically, but we don't want this quantity of grass long term. But we're still kind of working out where we want patio areas and where we want extra planting and stuff like that. But I can tell you this much, nature is loving it. We had a fox coming right up to the house the other day. We've had parakeets in the plum tree. This little fella keeps greeting me every time I'm at the compost heap. We've got an unbelievable amount of bees and hoverflies and butterflies. So generally, things are looking a lot better than they were when we first got this garden 4-ish years ago. But we fully accept there's still a lot to do. As per usual, we have learned so much stuff from you guys. So please continue to post your constructive criticism, tips of what plants we should add. That's an owl going by the way while I'm chatting. Now that we've got the greenhouse, I quite like the idea of growing perennials from seed to save spending a fortune on like mature perennials. But as you will be more than aware, I am no expert with gardening. I have generally no clue what I'm doing. I'm just kind of making it up as I go. But it is all a learning curve and I am thoroughly enjoying it. As per usual, folks, look after one another, be nice to each other. We shall see you next time. Taddy bye.